The day the aliens came was a Tuesday, a normal Tuesday until it wasn't. June walked down the busy street in Seoul, his shoulders slumped. Another failed meeting, another pitch rejected. At 28, he had made exactly 0 successful films. Despite graduating top of his class from film school 4 years ago, we're looking for something with more commercial appeal, the producer had told him, not even bothering to look up from his phone. Your ideas are too unusual. June kicked an empty soda can and watched it clatter across the sidewalk. His apartment waited for him, small and empty, filled with film equipment he could barely afford and scripts no one wanted to read. The first sign that something was wrong came when everyone around him stopped walking at the same time. June nearly bumped into a businessman who had frozen mid-step, his eyes fixed on the sky. June looked up. The ship appeared first as a dark spot against the clouds, then grew larger until it blocked the sun. Not round like in the movies, but long and angular, with strange protrusions that seemed to shift and change as he watched. It was massive, at least a kilometer long, hovering silently above the city. While others ran or stood frozen, June reached for the camera he always carried. His hands shook, but his filmmaker's instincts took over. He zoomed in, capturing details others might miss: the strange shimmer of the hull, the way light bent around it, the smaller crafts beginning to deploy from its sides. More ships appeared. 3, then 7, then too many to count, positioning themselves over major cities across the globe. Later, people would learn that similar scenes were playing out in New York, London, Beijing, Cairo, and dozens of other locations. "This is it," whispered a woman next to June. "We're done for." But June wasn't listening. He was filming. This was the story of a lifetime. Across the city, Tai sat in her small office at the Korean Foreign Ministry, surrounded by translation manuals and linguistic references. At 26, she was one of the youngest senior translators in the department, specializing in obscure dialects and linguistic patterns. Her colleagues joked that she could probably decode alien languages if given the chance. Now that joke didn't seem funny anymore. Her phone rang, then her office line, then her emergency government line. All at once. "Ms. Tay, report to the main conference room immediately." Her supervisor's voice was tight with fear. "Bring your complete reference materials." "What's happening?" she asked, already gathering her tablets and notebooks. "First contact," he said simply, and hung up. Tay ran down the hallway, passing panicked government workers and military personnel rushing in all directions. In the conference room, a group of senior officials huddled around screens showing the ships now positioned over major cities worldwide. "The Americans are receiving some kind of transmission," the defense minister said. "They're sharing the data. Now." A series of sounds played through the room's speakers, clicks, hums, and tones in patterns that made no sense to most listeners. But Tay leaned forward, her eyes widening. "There's structure there," she said quietly. Then louder, "There's linguistic structure. Play it again." After the third replay, Tay grabbed a marker and began writing on the whiteboard. Not words, but patterns, visual representations of the sounds. The officials watched in silence as she worked, her face intense with concentration. "It's not random," she finally said. "There are repeating elements, consistent patterns. It's a language." "Can you understand it?" the Prime Minister asked, having arrived minutes earlier. "Not yet," Tay admitted. "But I can start building a framework. With more samples, I might be able to identify basic communication elements." In that moment, Tay became perhaps the most important person in Korea. Back on the street, June continued filming as the first smaller craft descended from the mothership. It hovered 20 meters above the main square, a sleek object that reminded him of a dragonfly, beautiful and somehow threatening. The crowds had either fled or pressed against buildings, watching in terror and awe. Police tried to establish a perimeter but seemed as lost as everyone else. Military jets screamed overhead but kept their distance from the alien crafts. A beam of light shot down from the smaller ship, and a figure appeared. Humanoid, but clearly not human. Tall and thin, with skin that shifted colors like oil on water. Its head was elongated, with no visible nose and 4 eyes positioned in a diamond pattern. June zoomed in, capturing every detail. The alien raised a device, and suddenly, voices emerged from every electronic device in the area: phones, advertising screens, car radios. The same message, in heavily accented but understandable Korean: People of Earth, we are the Viridian Fleet, representatives of the galactic hegemony. Your planet has resources we require. You will submit to assessment and extraction. Resistance is unnecessary and inefficient. You have 7 rotations of your planet to prepare your leadership for surrender discussions. This is standard procedure. The message repeated in English, then Chinese, then other languages. June lowered his camera for a moment, trying to process what he had heard. Aliens were real. They were here, and they were following standard procedure. Something about that struck him as absurdly funny. Even in the middle of what might be the end of human civilization, they had traveled across space to conquer Earth, and they made it sound like a business meeting. He raised his camera again, focusing on the alien figure still standing in the beam of light. I'm going to need a better zoom lens, he muttered to himself. 12 hours later, Tay found herself on a military transport plane bound for New York. The United Nations was assembling a response team: linguists, scientists, diplomats, and military leaders from around the world. Her work decoding the initial message had earned her a seat on the plane. She stared out the window at the dark sky, wondering if one of those stars was the aliens' home world. The military had provided her with all available recordings of the alien communications, and she'd spent the hours since first contact building a preliminary translation matrix. There was something odd about their language, not just its foreign structure, but its purpose. It was precise but limited, focused entirely on command and control, resource assessment, and hierarchy. No words for art that she could detect, no terms for music or stories or plays. Tay made a note of this curious absence. It might mean nothing, but in her experience, what a language lacked often revealed as much as what it contained. As the plane began its descent toward New York, where one of the largest alien ships hovered over Manhattan, Tay had no idea that her observation would soon connect with a desperate filmmaker's crazy idea and change the course of human history. 3 days after the aliens arrived, June found himself in a place he never expected to be. Outside the Blue House, the Korean presidential compound. The guards at the gate looked at his ID with suspicion. "You're the filmmaker?" one asked, checking his list again. June nodded, trying to look more confident than he felt. His camera bag hung heavy on his shoulder, containing the footage that had somehow gotten him here. In the days since the Viridians arrived, his videos had gone viral worldwide. Major news networks paid him for the rights to his footage. For the first time in his life, his bank account had more than 3 digits, but money wasn't why he was here. After being searched twice, June was led through corridors lined with worried officials until he reached a large conference room. Inside, military officers and government officials surrounded a long table. At its head sat President Kim, his face tight with stress. And there, to his surprise, was Tay. She looked different from the brief glimpse he'd caught of her on international news. Tired. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail and papers covered in strange symbols were spread in front of her. She gave him a quick nod of recognition. "This is the filmmaker?" President Kim asked. "Yes, sir," said an aide. "His footage has been invaluable for studying the Viridian ships. And he claims to have a proposal," the defense minister added with obvious skepticism. All eyes turned to June. His mouth went dry. He had practiced this pitch 100 times in his small apartment, but standing here now it seemed crazy, completely insane. Yet he had nothing to lose. "Mr. President," June began, setting up his tablet, "I believe we might have an option besides surrender or destruction." The room was silent as June connected his tablet to the main screen. His hands shook slightly, but his voice grew steadier as he spoke. "The Viridians have given us 7 days before they expect our surrender. But what if we offer them something they don't expect? Something they might value more than our resources?" "And what would that be?" asked the foreign minister. June took a deep breath. Entertainment. The room erupted in voices. This is ridiculous. We're facing extinction. Who let this kid in here? President Kim raised his hand and the room fell silent. Explain, he said simply. June tapped his tablet and clips from his footage appeared on the screen, edited together with music and narration, dramatic cuts and angles making the alien arrival look like the opening of a blockbuster film. They're going to kill us all and you want to make a movie? President Kim asked, his voice incredulous. Not just a movie, June said, switching to a presentation he had made overnight. The greatest reality show the galaxy has ever seen. He outlined his plan. To document the alien invasion as entertainment. To broadcast it back to the Viridians' homeworlds and their conquered territories. To market Earth not as a threat, but as an essential cultural resource, the galaxy's premier content creators. Most of the room looked at him like he had lost his mind, but Tay was nodding slowly. Their language, she said, drawing everyone's attention. It has no words for art or entertainment, no concepts for fiction or storytelling. Their communication is entirely functional. She stood up and walked to a whiteboard filled with alien symbols and their translations. I've been working with linguists from around the world. We've made progress translating their language, but there's something strange about it. It's empty. No poetry. No humor. Nothing but commands, reports, and hierarchical statements. So? The defense minister asked. So? Tay continued. What if their entire civilization is like that? Technologically advanced but culturally barren. What if they have nothing like our movies, our music, our stories? The room was quiet as people considered this. It's still a crazy idea, someone muttered. Then a new voice spoke from the doorway. Crazy enough that it might work. Heads turned to see Hyun, the famous media executive, entering the room. Tall and confident in an expensive suit, he was known for turning struggling entertainment companies into global powerhouses. Mr. President, Hyun said with a respectful bow. I asked to join when I heard about this meeting. I've seen this young man's footage and I've reviewed the alien communications that have been made public. He walked to the front of the room, standing beside June. I believe there's potential here. If these aliens truly lack what we would call entertainment or creative arts that gives us a unique product to offer, something they can't get anywhere else. You're suggesting we try to sell movies to creatures threatening to destroy us? The defense minister asked. I'm suggesting, Hyun said calmly, that humans have always survived by adapting, by finding unexpected solutions. Military options have been analyzed and found wanting. We don't have the technology to fight them, so perhaps we use what we do, have creativity. President Kim leaned forward. How would this even work? June felt a surge of hope. They were actually listening. He tapped his tablet again, showing a rough plan. First, we create content specifically designed to introduce the Viridians to human entertainment. We start with reality programming, documenting our own reactions to their arrival. Then we move to scripted content, drama, comedy, everything we can produce quickly. Hyun nodded. We would need to establish a broadcast method to transmit to their ships. We can do that, said the science minister, speaking for the first time. We've been analyzing their communication systems. We could adapt our signals to be compatible. Tay stepped forward. I have enough understanding of their language now to craft introductory messages, to explain the concept of entertainment. June looked around the room, amazed to see people actually considering his idea. The tension had shifted. There was still fear, but also a flicker of something new. Hope, maybe, or at least curiosity. This is still crazy, President Kim said. But our options are limited. He turned to his chief of staff. Set up a global video conference. If we're going to try this, we need cooperation from entertainment companies worldwide. The next 48 hours passed in a blur. June barely slept as he moved between meetings, explaining his concept over and over to executives, directors, producers from around the world. To his surprise, Hyun stayed by his side, lending his considerable influence to the plan. Production teams were assembled in every major country. Camera crews were dispatched to film the alien ships, human reactions, military preparations, everything that might make compelling viewing for a species that had never experienced entertainment. Tay worked with international teams to craft introductory messages explaining the concept of storytelling, of fiction versus reality, of drama and comedy and all the forms of entertainment humans had created over thousands of years. 5 days after the alien arrival, with just 2 days left before their deadline, Earth was ready to broadcast its first galactic entertainment package. June, Tai, and Hyun stood in a newly established broadcast center in Seoul, surrounded by screens showing similar centers in Los Angeles, Mumbai, London, and other entertainment capitals. "This might be the biggest mistake in human history," Hyun said as technicians prepared the broadcast system. "Or the greatest programming innovation ever," June replied, trying to hide his nervousness. Tay finished reviewing the translated introduction one last time. "The signal is ready. We can broadcast to all Viridian ships simultaneously." President Kim's face appeared on a screen. Similar leaders from other nations joined the conference. With solemn nods, they gave their approval. June took a deep breath as the countdown began. In 10 seconds, they would find out if his crazy idea would save humanity or fail spectacularly. 3, 2, 1. "Broadcast initiated," said the chief technician. The first ever human entertainment signal directed at an alien civilization began its journey from Earth to the Viridian fleet. And with it, the fate of humanity now rested on a desperate filmmaker's wildest pitch. The first response from the Viridian fleet came 6 hours after Earth's initial broadcast. June was dozing in a chair at the Seoul Broadcast Center when Tay shook him awake. "They replied," she said, her eyes wide. "They actually replied." June jumped up, nearly knocking over his coffee. Around them, the center buzzed with activity as technicians and officials gathered around the main screens. "What did they say?" June asked, rubbing his eyes. Tay held up her tablet. "It's short. I've translated it. Your transmission is unexpected. Explain purpose." "That's it?" Hyun asked, appearing beside them. Despite the crisis, he still looked perfectly put together, as if alien invasions were just another business challenge. "It's not a no," June said, feeling a tiny spark of hope. "They're confused, but they're listening." President Kim joined them via video conference, along with leaders and representatives from around the world. "Do we respond now?" "Yes," Tay said, firmly. "We can't leave them waiting. They value efficiency." For the next hour, Tay worked with the international translation team to craft a response. They kept it simple. "This is entertainment. Information for enjoyment. We offer more in exchange for peaceful communication." After sending the message, they waited. 30 minutes later, another reply came. "Concept of entertainment is unclear. Send additional samples." "They're interested," Hyun said, allowing himself a small smile. "They don't understand, but they're curious." Over the next 24 hours, Earth sent a carefully curated package of entertainment to the Viridian ships. Short films explaining what movies were, music from different cultures, comedy skits with visual humor that might translate across species, and most importantly, footage of the aliens themselves, edited to tell the story of their arrival from a human perspective. On the Viridian command ship hovering above New York, Admiral Krej was confused. The admiral had led conquest missions to 17 worlds, and none had responded like this. "They are not surrendering," Krej told the ship's council, a group of 7 senior officers. "But neither are they preparing for battle. They are sending us information." "What kind of information?" asked Sub-Commander Vez, the fleet's resource assessment officer. "Irrelevant information," Krej said. "Stories that are not true. Sounds arranged in patterns. Images edited to create false sequences." "For what purpose?" Vez asked. "They call it entertainment," Krej said. The word felt strange in the admiral's mouth. It had no direct translation in the Viridian language. "Show us," ordered Elder Torm, the oldest member of the council. Krej activated the main viewing screen, It displayed one of the human transmissions, a dramatized version of the Viridian fleet's arrival over Earth. Somehow the humans had already created a narrative around the event, complete with musical accompaniment and visual effects that made the ships look even more impressive than they were. The council watched in silence. None of them had seen anything like it before. "This is unauthorized," Krej finally said. But the Admiral couldn't look away from the screen. Back on Earth, the broadcast centers were running nonstop. When the deadline for surrender passed, without any attack from the Viridian fleet, people began to hope that June's crazy plan might actually be working. "They're watching," Tay said, analyzing the data from the alien ships. "They've been receiving everything we've sent, and they're asking for more." June had barely slept for days, coordinating with production teams worldwide to create content. His small apartment had been turned into a temporary office with editors, writers, and assistants coming and going at all hours. "We need to take this to the next level," Hyun said during a strategy meeting. "Right now, we're just showing them what entertainment is. Now we need to make them want it." "How?" June asked, stifling a yawn. "We make it exclusive," Tay suggested. "I've been studying their communications. Status is important to them. Hierarchy matters." Hyun snapped his fingers. "Subscription models, premium content. We turn this into a business." June thought he was joking, but Hyun was completely serious. "We create packages," Hyun continued, sketching on a tablet. "Basic access for all ships, premium access for command vessels, exclusive content for their leaders." "You want to charge aliens who are planning to conquer us?" June asked, incredulous. "Not with money," Tay explained. "With behavior. They watch our basic content for free. If they want premium content, they have to agree to peaceful communication. For exclusive content, they withdraw weapon systems." It was bizarre, but it made a strange kind of sense. And they had nothing to lose. Within days, they had set up the first interstellar streaming service. They called it Earth Prime. The interface was simple enough for aliens to understand, with clear categories and subscription levels. The response was immediate. "Command ships are requesting premium access," Tay reported, looking stunned. "The flagship is asking about exclusive content." "What are they offering in exchange?" President Kim asked during the daily briefing. "Non-aggression," Tay said. "And data. Scientific and cultural information about their civilization and the other worlds they've conquered." On the Viridian command ship, Admiral Krej had called an emergency council meeting. The viewing screen displayed the Earth Prime interface, showing content that was labeled Premium Access and Exclusive. "They are restricting access to their transmissions," Krej told the council. "Higher quality content is being reserved for ships that agree to their terms." "This is unusual," Elder Torm noted. "Conquered species do not set terms." "They are not conquered yet," Krej reminded them. "And I find myself curious about this exclusive content." Sub-Commander Vez looked alarmed. "You are considering accepting their conditions? This violates conquest protocol." Krej was silent for a moment. "Protocol exists to serve the hegemony's interests. If there is value in these transmissions, it would be negligent not to investigate." The truth was more personal. Krej had been watching the human broadcasts continuously. The Admiral had never experienced anything like it. Stories that weren't real but somehow felt important. Music that created strange sensations. Even the dramatized version of the Viridian arrival had given Krej a feeling of pride. It was uncomfortable, these new sensations, but also compelling. "I will negotiate access to their premium content," Krej decided, "for research purposes." Within hours, the flagship and 3 command ships had subscribed to Earth's premium package in exchange for deactivating certain weapon systems. The news spread across Earth, bringing cautious celebration. "It's working," June said in amazement as he watched the subscription numbers climb. "They actually want our shows." Hyun nodded, looking at his tablet. "The analytics are fascinating. They watch everything multiple times. Reality programs are especially popular. They seem fascinated by human daily life." The documentary about the first contact is their most watched content, Ty added. They keep requesting more footage of themselves. They're vain, June realized. They like seeing themselves on screen. This gave him an idea. A crazy, possibly dangerous idea. What if we make them the stars? He suggested. A reality show about the Viridian commanders themselves. We could call it Invasion Force or something. Like that. Tay looked concerned. How would we film on their ships? We don't need to, June explained excitedly. We already have footage of them from our news cameras. We can request more communication from their commanders, edit it into episodes, add dramatic music and narration. Turn them into celebrities, Hyun said slowly, seeing the potential. That's brilliant. 3 weeks after the aliens had arrived, threatening to destroy humanity, Invasion Force Inside the Viridian Fleet premiered on Earth Prime. It portrayed the alien commanders as complex characters with competing motives and dramatic personal stories, most of it completely fabricated by human writers. Admiral Krej, once the most feared conqueror in the hegemony, was now the reluctant star of the most popular show in the galaxy. And to everyone's surprise, when the Admiral saw the first episode, the response was not anger but a request for more. They like it, Ty said, translating Krej's message. They want to know when the next episode will be available. June laughed, in disbelief. We've turned an alien invasion into a reality TV show, and the aliens are binge-watching themselves. What had begun as a desperate gambit to save Earth was turning into something nobody could have predicted. The galaxy's first streaming war. 6 months after the Viridian fleet appeared in Earth's skies, the world had changed in ways no one could have predicted. June stood at the window of his new office, looking out at the Seoul skyline. The massive Viridian ship still hovered above the city, but it no longer seemed threatening. In fact, smaller shuttles regularly traveled between the ship and the ground, carrying alien visitors eager to experience human culture firsthand. His office occupied the top floor of a building that had been converted into the headquarters of Earth Prime Entertainment, now the largest media company in human history. What had started as a desperate plan to save the planet had become a thriving business that employed thousands. The numbers from last week, Hyun said, entering the office and placing a tablet on June's desk. We reached 2 billion subscribers. 2 billion? June turned from the window, shocked. But there are only a few thousand Viridians. Most are from the conquered worlds, Hyun explained. The Viridians have been sharing our content throughout their empire. 17 planets now have access to Earth Prime. June sat down, trying to process this information. What had begun as a way to distract the aliens from destroying Earth had spread beyond anything they had imagined. And the new production? He asked. Galactic Voices is ready to launch next week, Hyun confirmed. Contestants from 3 different species have already arrived for filming. Galactic Voices was June's newest project, a singing competition featuring performers from Earth and other worlds. It had seemed impossible just months ago, but now alien tourists were common enough that finding contestants hadn't been difficult. Across the city, Tae sat in a large conference room at the newly established Ministry of Intergalactic Cultural Exchange. As the first person to successfully communicate with the Viridians, she had been appointed as the lead human representative in ongoing negotiations. The Regelian delegation will arrive next Tuesday, an assistant informed her. They're particularly interested in our drama formats. Tae nodded, making a note. The Rigelians were from one of the worlds previously conquered by the Viridians, but now, inspired by Earth's example, they were developing their own entertainment industry. Make sure their translators have the updated cultural reference guide, she said, and arrange a tour of the drama production facilities. Her desk was covered with reports from around the world. Countries that had invested heavily in creative industries were seeing unprecedented economic growth. Seoul, once known for its technology, had become the entertainment capital of the galaxy. Hollywood, Bollywood, and other film centers were working around the clock to produce content for an audience that now spanned multiple star systems. But not everyone was happy about these changes. On the Viridian homeworld, the Hegemony Council was in crisis. The large chamber where the highest leaders met was filled with angry voices. Admiral Craig has failed to complete the conquest of Earth, one elder said. Instead, the Admiral appears on their information displays, discussing our culture and history. It was true. Craig, once the fiercest conqueror in the Hegemony's fleet, had become a regular guest on Earth talk shows. The Admiral's latest appearance had been on Galactic Perspectives, where Craig had discussed Viridian art forms, or the lack thereof. More concerning is the effect on our controlled worlds, another council member added. Productivity has declined by 30% across the Empire. Workers are spending their rest periods watching Earth transmissions. They have weaponized creativity, the head elder said gravely. We did not anticipate this form of resistance. Even more alarming to the Council was the recent announcement from 7 formerly conquered worlds. In a joint broadcast, representatives had declared their cultural independence, citing human artistic principles as their inspiration. While they still acknowledged Viridian authority in matters of trade and defense, they claimed the right to develop their own entertainment industries and cultural identities. The Hegemony had never faced this kind of rebellion before. There were no protocols for dealing with conquered species who didn't want to fight, but simply wanted to tell their own stories. Back on Earth, June was in a production meeting when his assistant interrupted with an urgent message. Admiral Craig is here, she said, looking nervous. In person. June exchanged surprised glances with his team. Though communication with the Viridians was now routine, in-person visits from high-ranking officers were still rare. Craig entered the room, ducking, slightly to fit through the human-sized doorway. The Admiral's skin shifted through shades of blue and green, an indication of serious thought June had learned. Everyone stood, offering the greeting gesture that Tay had taught them. Producer June, Craig said, using the title that had become almost sacred among the Viridians. I bring important news from the Hegemony. June felt a flicker of worry. Despite the peaceful months, the Viridians still had the technology to destroy Earth if they chose. The Council has made a decision regarding Earth, Craig continued. They wish to formalize our relationship. What kind of relationship? June asked cautiously. Earth will be recognized as a cultural resource world, Craig explained. Not a conquest, but a partner. In exchange for continued access to your entertainment, the Hegemony will guarantee Earth's safety and independent status. June felt relief wash over him. That's excellent news, Admiral. There is more, Craig said. The Council is establishing a new division focused on cultural development. They have asked me to lead it. The Admiral's 4 eyes blinked, in what June now recognized as embarrassment. I would like to request your assistance in developing creative industries on the Viridian homeworld, Craig said. We have technology, but we have realized our civilization lacks stories. Later, that day, June, Tay, and Hyun met with President Kim to discuss the Admiral's proposal. It's more than we could have hoped for, President Kim said, reviewing the terms. From threatened destruction to cultural partnership in 6 months. The galaxy is changing, Tay said. The Viridians conquered with weapons, but they're discovering that culture has its own power. What do you think, June? Hyun asked. Will you help the Admiral set up Viridian entertainment industries? June thought about it. 6 months ago, he had been a failed filmmaker with nothing to lose. Now he was being asked to bring creativity to an entire civilization. I'll do it, he decided. But I want to document the process. Cultural revolution, the making of Viridian entertainment. It could be our biggest show yet. President Kim laughed. Always the filmmaker. It's what saved us, June pointed out. The world had been transformed. Nations that had once competed through military might now race to produce the most compelling content. The global economy had shifted to prioritize creative industries. Young people dreamed not of being astronauts or athletes, but showrunners and content creators. Seoul had changed too. The city that had once feared the massive ship above it now built viewing platforms for tourists, eager to see the Viridian vessel. Studios and production facilities had sprung up everywhere, and film schools had waiting lists years long. And somewhere beyond Earth, on 17 worlds once conquered by force, people of different shapes and biologies gathered around screens, watching human stories and beginning to tell their own. As night fell over Seoul, June sat in his office working on the treatment for his next project. On his screen was the title, The Day They Came, a galactic first contact story. It would be the biggest production in human history, the dramatized story of how a struggling filmmaker, a dedicated translator, and a media executive turned an alien invasion into the greatest movie deal the galaxy had ever seen. 2 years after the Viridians first appeared in Earth's skies, Seoul was transformed. The city glowed with lights and color, with massive screens on buildings showing advertisements for the biggest event in human history. The first intergalactic film festival. Ships from 32 different worlds filled Earth's orbit, not with weapons but with delegations of filmmakers, writers, and performers. What had begun as a desperate plan to avoid destruction had become a celebration of creativity that spanned the galaxy. June adjusted his formal jacket as he looked in the mirror. Tonight was the premiere of The Threat, the big-budget film dramatizing the first contact between humans and Viridians. It had been filmed over the past year with a mixed cast of human and alien actors. His apartment was no longer the small, empty place it had been 2 years ago. Now it occupied the top floor of one of Seoul's most exclusive buildings, with views of both the city and the Viridian mothership that still hovered above, though now it was lit with colorful lights and served as both tourist attraction and cultural embassy. "The car is waiting," his assistant said through the intercom. "Ms. Tae and Mr. Hyun are already at the venue." June took one last look in the mirror, hardly recognizing himself. From failed filmmaker to the executive producer of the most anticipated movie in galactic history, life had taken a strange turn. Across the city, the Seoul Grand Theater had been expanded and renovated for the festival. Red carpets stretched from the street to the entrance, lined with both human and alien journalists. Lights flashed as celebrities from multiple worlds posed for pictures. Inside, Tae supervised the final preparations. As Earth's Minister of Intergalactic Cultural Exchange, she was responsible for making sure the event ran smoothly. Her translation skills were rarely needed now. Most visiting aliens used the translation devices that had become standard technology, but her understanding of different species customs was invaluable. "The Rigelian delegation needs lower lighting in their section," she told an assistant. "And make sure the Centauri representatives have their special seating. Their spine ridges make standard chairs uncomfortable." Hyun appeared at her side, elegant as always in a perfectly tailored suit. In the 2 years since first contact, his media empire had grown to include holdings on 6 different planets. "Everything ready?" he asked, looking around the theater. "As ready as we can be," Tae replied. "Though I'm still nervous about Admiral Craig's reaction to the film." The Admiral had been heavily involved in the production, serving as a consultant, to ensure the Viridian culture was portrayed accurately. Craig had become fascinated with filmmaking and had insisted that the character based on the Admiral have what Craig called a compelling arc. "Craig has seen most of it already," Hyun reminded. The Admiral seemed pleased with the rough cut. "Still, it's one thing to watch it in a private screening, another to see it with an audience of thousands," Tae said. As they spoke, a commotion at the entrance announced the arrival of the Viridian delegation. Admiral Craig led the group, now wearing the formal robes of the newly created Hegemony Cultural Council, rather than a military uniform. Behind Craig came other Viridians who had become familiar figures on Earth. Ship commanders who had appeared in documentaries, cultural officers who had embraced human entertainment forms. The crowd of mixed species parted respectfully. 2 years ago, the sight of a Viridian would have caused panic. Now they were celebrated visitors. June arrived shortly after, walking the red carpet and stopping for interviews. Reporters from dozens of worlds asked him about the film, about the future of intergalactic entertainment, about how it felt to be the human who had changed the course of galactic history. "I was just trying to tell a good story," he told them. The same answer he always gave. I never expected all of this. Inside the theater, he found Tae and Hyun waiting for him near the entrance to the main hall. Ready for the biggest premiere in history? Hyun asked with a smile. June nodded, though his stomach was tight with nerves. As ready as I'll ever be. They entered the theater together, finding their reserved seats in the center of the main floor. Around them, the hall filled with beings. From across the galaxy, humans sitting beside Viridians, Rigelians next to Centauri, species that had been enemies under hegemony rule now sharing armrests and snack foods. President Kim arrived with other world leaders and was seated in a special section. The president caught June's eye and gave him a nod of recognition. They had come a long way from that desperate meeting 2 years ago when June had pitched his crazy idea. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the audience. On stage, a spotlight illuminated the festival director, a respected filmmaker who had been chosen to represent Earth. "Welcome, friends from across the stars," the director said, her voice translated simultaneously into a dozen languages. 2 years ago, we faced extinction. Today, we celebrate creation. She spoke about the power of stories to connect across differences, to build understanding where there had been fear. As she talked, June thought about how far they had come, not just humans, but all the species present. And now, the director concluded, it is my honor to present The Threat, the first truly intergalactic film production in our shared history. The lights went down completely, and the screen came to life. The opening shot showed Earth from space peaceful and blue, until shadows began to cover it as the Viridian ships moved into position. June hardly breathed as the film progressed. He knew every scene, had been involved in every decision, but seeing it with this audience made it new again. He watched their reactions, the tension during the dramatic moments, the laughter at the carefully placed humor, the hushed silence during the emotional scenes. Beside him, Tae squeezed his hand during the climactic sequence where his character pitched the entertainment plan to the world leaders. The scene had been dramatized, made more exciting than the real meeting had been, but the heart of it was true. When the film ended 2 hours later, the audience sat in silence for a moment. Then as the credits began to roll, they erupted in applause, hands, tentacles, and appendages of all shapes rising in appreciation. The sound was deafening. The lights came up partially, and June could see that many in the audience, humans and aliens alike, were displaying their species' signs of emotional response. Even Admiral Craig's skin was cycling through colors that indicated deep feeling. The director returned to the stage, inviting the cast and creators to join her. June, Tae, and Hyun made their way forward, along with the actors and production team. Admiral Craig joined them, towering over the humans but standing proudly beside them. "Did you ever imagine this?" Tae whispered to June as they stood before the cheering crowd. "Not exactly," June admitted, looking out at the sea of faces from across the galaxy. "I was just trying to save my career. Saving the world was a bonus." After the premiere, a celebration spread throughout Seoul. Streets filled with beings from dozens of worlds, all brought together by their shared appreciation of story. June found a quiet moment on a balcony overlooking the festivities. Hyun joined him, datapad in hand as always. "The Hegemony Council has officially disbanded," Hyun said. "They're reforming as the Galactic Cultural Cooperative. They want us to produce the ceremony." June laughed. "Of course they do. There's more," Hyun added, looking at his pad. "Long-range sensors have detected a new fleet approaching from the edge of the solar system. Unknown configuration, not in any Viridian database." June felt a moment of the old fear, but it passed quickly. Earth was not the same vulnerable planet it had been 2 years ago. It now had allies across the galaxy and a unique position as the creative center of intergalactic society. "They're sending a transmission," Hyun continued. "Tae's team just translated. Didn't they say, 'We heard you have stories to share'?" June smiled. "Have we got a deal for them?" As the celebration continued below, a shooting star crossed the sky above Seoul. 2 years ago, such a sight might have caused panic, another alien ship coming to threaten Earth. Now it was just part of the larger universe that humanity had joined. In the final scene after the festival, a new alien fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system. Their message was simple. We heard you have stories to share. Humanity's response was equally simple. Have we got a deal for you? Earth had found its place in the galaxy not through military might or technological superiority, but through its most human quality, the ability to tell stories that connected hearts and minds across the vastness of space. The aliens had threatened Earth, but humans didn't just survive. They thrived, changing galactic culture forever.